Hey, Baba Ali, I've just seen your clip on Who Hijacked My Religion on YouTube. And I want to say you have an awful lot of good points. You're a very engaging person. You've got an awful lot of personality, certainly a lot of charisma, and you've done a great slap-up job on that. There's some things I would agree with you in what you're saying, that there is an agenda possibly by the media in the West, certainly in the United States, not as much here. If you come to England, where I live, here in London, the BBC it would support an awful lot of what you're saying. I think there is a bias on, all media has bias. That's not what I'm certainly challenging. What I will challenge is this idea that somehow we have hijacked your religion by only pointing and only showing those individuals who are violent. Goodness sakes, Baba Ali, just look around the world and you will see that almost everywhere Islam is, it's in conflict. Stanley Huntington came up with this premise back in 1996 in his book Clash of Civilizations, where he stipulated if you just look at every Muslim country, their borders are bloody. They are in conflict with each other. They're in conflict with all their neighbors. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that Islam has a lot of problem with violence. Please don't question our intelligence on that. Most Muslim countries are in conflict. That is not in question here. Secondly, who are you to say that you represent Islam? You say, look at me. If we're good Muslims, we represent Islam. The audacity that you can sit there on television and tell us that you are the prime example, or that people of your kind are the only ones that can be acknowledged as basically the authority of Islam. Stop and think. Be careful. I would never say that as a Christian. I doubt the Jews, anyone Jew would say that. Don't you go around saying that you are the best example of Muslims, or the only peaceful Muslims are the best example. If you're going to define a religion, and stop and let's define terms. If you're going to define a religion, you need a revelation to define it. More than that, you need a paradigm. You need a model of that revelation. And for you, you know good and well it's not you that's that revelation, nor what you say is that revelation, nor is it you that is that model. The audacity that you even suggest that. If you want to look at your revelation, you've got to go to this book here. This is the Qur'an, written in both English and in Arabic. You've got to go to this book, and then you've got to go to the Prophet Muhammad, your prophet, as the man who best models it. Please do not assume that you're better than him. I know you're not, and I'm being rather facetious here, because it's just the audacity of your statement. I would never say that I am the paradigm or the model of my religion. Nor would I say that what I say or what the things that come out of my mouth are the revelation. No, I've got to go back to the New Testament, and I've got to go back to the person of Jesus Christ. If we can define terms on that, then we've got a debate. All right, are you ready, Baba Ali? So stop with this remonstrating about we are all peaceful. You're not all peaceful. The statistics bear that out. And stop with remonstration that you are the best paradigm. You are not the best paradigm. You're engaging. You've got a lot of personality. But let's leave it there. Let's go back to the Revelation. And let's go back to the 7th century, when this book was supposedly revealed. To do that, you need to split this book in two. The latter half of the book of the Quran are what we call the Meccan surahs. They were revealed from 610 to 622. The first part of the Quran are the Medinan surahs. They were revealed the last 10 years of the Prophet's life, from 622 to 632. We're agreed upon that. For those people who don't know that, it is those two halves of the book that are the problem. The latter half is not a difficulty. There's not much violence in the latter half. That's why most Muslims always quote references from that area. They're not quoting from the Medinan surahs, because that's where the problem exists. It's in the Medinan surahs that you see all these verses of violence, violence, violence. Goodness sakes, the book, the entire first part of the Quran is full of violence. Please don't question our ignorance on this. We have read the book. I've read the whole thing through a number of times. I've spent 25 years working with Muslims. I certainly should know what it's saying. Let me just give you some examples of what the Quran is saying. Now, you know this one, and you're going to sit there and floor your top whenever I mention Surah 9, because you don't like Surah 9. Most Muslims don't like to read Surah 9, because Surah 9 is the most violent chapter in the whole Quran, which is interesting because it's also the last one revealed to the Prophet, revealed in 632. So therefore it's the most authoritative chapter, because anything that comes, if there's any contradiction in the Quran, you have the law of abrogation. In Surah 2, Ayah 106, and Surah 17, Ayah 101, that's what we give mansukh. We give something better, nasikh. It is the greatest of all the nasikh verses, because it is the latest one. So anything that contradicts it, it has superiority over it. Now that's why I go to Surah 9. That's why so many of us do go to Surah 9. It is full of violence. Let me just read you one verse. Surah 9, Ayah 5. Then when the sacred months have passed, then kill the mushrikun wherever you find them, and capture them, and besiege them, and lie in wait for them in each ambush. The mushrikun, those people who commit shirk, those people who are idolaters, those people who elevate another person or being with God. Many people believe I'm a mushrik because I supposedly, according to a lot of Muslims, I've elevated Jesus to the status of God. Now, I believe the mushriks really are dealing with pagans, probably idolaters, like Hindus. The problem is it says besiege them wherever you find them. That means it's not saying wait for them to attack you first and defend yourself. You're on the offense here. It's very clear that this is a very offensive verse. And I've had a debate here at Cambridge Union with Dr. Azam Tamimi, and he said, Mr. Smith, this has nothing to do with you. I said, well then, let's go to verse 29, which does have to do with me. Verse 29 in the same chapter 9 says this, fight against those who believe not in Allah, I don't believe in Allah, nor in the last day, not the last days that's in the Qur'an, nor forbid that which has been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, and those who acknowledge not the religion of truth among the people of the scriptures, the Jews and the Christians. You're to fight me, according to verse 29. So don't tell me that there's no violence in the Quran. That means that you've got to fight me. That's the last thing the prophet said to you. Oh, I could go on and on. Surah 8:39. Fight the unbelievers. Again, another one. But let me just go, because there's so many I could go to. Let me just finish off with Surah 47, because this is one of the hardest ones. Surah 47, Ayah 4 says this, so when you meet those who disbelieve, that means me, smite their necks, till when you have killed and wounded many of them, that bind the bond firmly. Smite my necks. Kill me, basically is what it believes. And now it goes on. Further, it says, but he who, in order to test some of those, but those who are killed in the way of Allah, those who do jihad and are killed in the way of Allah, He will never let their deeds be lost. He will guide them and set the right their state and admit them to paradise. So here's the motivation. You're to smite our necks, and if you get killed in the battle, great is your reward. You're going straight to heaven. Now that's your scripture. I could go on to 149 of these verses. I've just given you 3 real quickly, right at the top of my head. There's 149 of these sword verses, horrendous verses, enormously violent, that's in your Quran. And you might say, well, I may be taking them out of the context. Give me the context, for heaven's sakes. Because what you will find is that over and over and over again, if you're going to look at the context, you've got to look at the Prophet's life. Look at his life. Read the Sira of Rasulullah by Ibn Hisham, and you will see that for the last 10 years of his life, your Prophet was involved in 29 battle campaigns, and he planned another 39, some say as many as 59 on top of that. The last 10 years of his life, it was replete with violence. He was violating people everywhere he went. Look at your own history. Look at the conquests. Within 10 years of the Prophet's death, Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, and Cairo were all under the auspices, all using the sword. Within the end of the 7th century, that was within 50 to 60 years after the Prophet's death, you had all the way from India in the east to Spain in the west, all of that land was under your control. All of it done by the sword. No one talks about the conquest. No, they all like to talk about the crusade. Nobody talks about the 1st century of Islam. The enormous amount of violence, basically following the example of your own Prophet. So be careful, be careful. If you're going to say Muslims are peaceful, to look at you, I'm not going to look at you, I'm going to look at your Quran. And I'm going to see these verses, enormous number of verses, all dealing with violence. And I'm going to look at your Prophet and see how he used and applied these verses, especially when he went to Medina. He was a man of violence. I'm sorry, Baba Ali, you cannot convince me that there's any difference. You cannot convince me that Islam is a religion of peace. Because I know every Muslim, if they're going to follow what their Quran says, and every Muslim, if they're going to follow what their prophets did, they're going to have to go back to this book. This book that is riddled with violence. This book that has verse after verse after verse after verse that talks people to kill, slay the unbelievers, smite off their head, besiege them, ambush them. These are the verses you're going to have to come up and convince us that these are not violent. Now, which are the true Muslims then? Are you, Baba Allah, the true Muslim? What I would say is you are basically influenced by the West. You live in America. You want to be politically correct. You have sanitized your religion so that it is politically correct, so that if it's acceptable to us as believers, you put yourself up on YouTube as your own highest paradigm. You have basically made Islam in your own image. You dare not do that. You've got to come back to your book and do that. And it's your book that condemns you. I don't condemn you, Baba Allah. I believe you are a man of peace. It is not you I condemn, nor do I condemn the Muslims. It is your book. It is the Quran itself that is the problem. And it is your prophet. It is the man called Muhammad, who is the man that modeled it. He's the paradigm for you. So please, for heaven's sakes, don't belittle our intelligence. And more than that, if you really are a man of peace, and you really want to find a man of peace, there's only one solution. You've got to come back home again. You've got to come back to Jesus Christ. Where in the world did Jesus use the sword? He never tried to defend himself. Never used a sword in defense. In fact, he went willingly to the cross. If you want to find peace, you've got to come back to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Not the Old Testament, the New Testament. That's our new covenant. You got to come back to that gospel, and you've got to come back to Jesus. What an answer for today. Everybody wants peace. You're not going to find it here in this book. You're not going to find it with Baba Ali Reed, because he's got to come back to this book for his paradigm. You're going to have to come home. You're going to have to come to the Bible. Come back to Jesus Christ and the New Testament. There is the only place you will find consistent peace. Come on home. We'd love to have you.